Good morning, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. And I wish to recognize and acknowledge the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples on whose traditional lands we are meeting today. I'm Katrine Conroy, the Minister of Forests, and I'd also like to introduce Matt MacDonald. Matt is going to be joining us in a few minutes on screen. He's a meteorologist and has been the lead forecaster at the BC Wildfire Service for the last 2 seasons. Before that, he was a weather forecast with Environment Canada, so he's well situated to give us a presentation. So from record flooding to unprecedented wildfires, the last couple of years have been challenging for British Columbians. The past fire season, the Premier and I flew over fire-ravaged landscapes and visited impacted communities. I visited Linton and spoke to devastated residents and wildfire professionals. Some of those professionals had lost their homes, and they continued to go out on the front lines and protect people fighting fires. I saw the devastation at Monty Creek and Paxton Valley and toured the Okanagan Indian Band with Chief Lewis. I not only saw the destruction of wildfires, I also saw the benefits of cultural burning. In fact, Chief Lewis took us to see his aunt's property. She's in her 80s. She does cultural burning every year, and she gets help now, he said, but her property was a little green oasis in amongst other people's burnt properties, so it showed the real evidence of how beneficial it is. I also saw how the Fire Smart program works, and when we met with the folks at Logan Lake and flew over their community. In August 2021, a wildfire approached the community, and the wildfire mitigation activities the community did paid off, and the community was spared from significant wildfire damage. We witnessed firsthand what adaptation during challenging and devastating conditions look like, and countless examples of resiliency and compassion. These communities deserve all our support, especially as the threat of wildfires appears to be increasing with the ongoing effects of climate change. That's why our most recent budget included a total of $359 million in new funding to protect British Columbians from wildfires. We have made the largest investment in the history of BC Wildfire Service. This includes $145 million that will help us to transform the organization into a year-round service and shift from its current reactive model, focused fighting fires after they start, to a much more proactive model. BC Wildfire Service will be able to focus on all 4 pillars of emergency management: prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. We are also better equipping the Wildfire Service to react and battle wildfires, with more than $26 million in capital funding to upgrade the agency's facilities. This is how we are providing our wildfire crews with the support they need to succeed. We know that prevention works and must be supported at the local level. That's why we are more than doubling annual funding available for wildfire prevention. As part of this, we are providing $90 million through our Fire Smart program to provide homeowners and communities with the information and tools that they need to protect their homes and neighbourhoods. This will be administered by the Union of BC Municipalities in partnership with the First Nations Emergency Services Society, and communities can apply for funding to help cover the costs of projects that help reduce wildfire risks on the ground. We also recognize that First Nations have vast amounts of traditional knowledge on how to prevent and manage wildfires on their territories. We are improving our partnership with Indigenous peoples to co-develop wildfire mitigation and preparedness strategies. Through this work, we are expanding the use of cultural and prescribed burning that will reduce wildfire risks. The investments we are making are all about people, and our government's plan to support communities as we cope and adapt to the ongoing effects of climate change. Now I'm going to turn things over to Matt, and I just want to let you know, not only is Matt our lead forecaster, he studies weather for a living, and I'm really grateful we have people like Matt working hard so that British Columbians can get a sense of what to expect this summer. And I know that it's on everyone's mind, just as it is on mine, so I'd like to invite Matt to walk us through the outlook on this year's fire season. Matt?
Great. Thank you very much, Minister Conroy, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Minister Conroy, and good morning, everyone. Before I get started, I'd just like to acknowledge that I get to present today from the traditional lands of the Sailks, the Sinixt, and the Ktunaxa people in southeastern British Columbia. I'm presenting also on behalf of our Predictive Services Unit at the BC Wildfire Service, which is made up of a whole team of fire weather forecasters and fire behavior analysts. So I'll start sharing my slides here and we'll get underway. All right, so a quick overview of where we're headed today in today's presentation. It'll take about 10 minutes. We'll start by reviewing recent weather patterns and how May played out before we step into the future. And then we'll take a look around at our current field conditions across the province. And then finally, we'll step into the outlook, and I'll leave you all with some key messages. So these two charts here are provided by our partners at Environment and Climate Change Canada. We'll start with the one on the left, which shows us just how cool the month of May was. And I don't think this will come as a surprise to any British Columbians. We're looking at temperatures that were 2 to 3 degrees cooler than average across the vast majority of the province. And this is a significant departure from normal. It has been really cool, and that has favored a slower start to the wildfire season. Over on the right-hand side, this is how our precipitation played out compared to historical averages. And the shades of green up and down the coast show us that it was wetter than normal in those parts. That signal continues into the central interior and parts of the northwest. And from this past weekend in the piece, it was a very wet weekend there. But the shades of white show us near normal conditions. And what I'd like to draw your attention to are these shades of brown, where it's been drier than normal. So that signal starts in the southern Caribou, extends down through the lower Thompson, up and down the Okanagan into the boundary region. And then portions of the Rocky Mountain Trench from approximately Cranbrook up to Fairmont Springs has also been drier than normal. And those will be parts of the province that we'll be keeping a close eye on here as we head into summer. I thought it'd be interesting to look at, why has our rain pattern been as observed? And really through the spring months, we haven't seen a very spring-like pattern. It's been more of a fall-like pattern in that a lot of our systems have been coming out of the southwest, typical flow pattern that we see more through the fall in the winter seasons. And this has really been favoring precipitation on the west-facing slopes of our mountain ranges, so up and down the Coast Range into northern parts of the province. And what this has also produced is what we call a rain shadow effect. So on the lee side of the Coast Mountain Range, into the Central Plateau, the Chilcotin, down into the Okanagan, they've seen much drier than normal conditions, and that same rain shadow pattern extends to the Rocky Mountain Trench. Now, what we've yet to see this spring is what we call these cold lows. So these cold low systems typically become detached from the jet stream. They become stationary for days, sometimes weeks at a time, and they help feed moisture into those drier belts. We've yet to see these. We're keeping a close eye out for them. And this will really determine whether or not we can play catch up on the precipitation front in those drier parts of the province. Now, in terms of lightning, this chart on the left-hand side shows us total amount of lightning strikes that we recorded this May. And while it may seem impressive, we recorded just under 3,000 lightning strikes. If we compare that to past Mays, we typically see upwards of 16,000 lightning strikes. So it's been pretty quiet in terms of lightning. And furthermore, you all know of the deeper than normal snow that we have in our alpine around the province. Lightning typically strikes ridge tops and peaks first. And because those are still covered in snow, we've seen no lightning starts to wildfire yet this season. So that's another good news piece here. And historically, if we compare with previous seasons, we usually see about 35 lightning starts in May. Okay, so let's look here at how this recent cool and wet weather pattern has affected our fuels and our forests in and around the province. And we'll start here with what we call our buildup index. And this represents the total amount of fuel that's ready to burn and compared to, again, historical averages. So we can see essentially a sea of white, pockets of green showing that we're near normal for this time of year or even lower than normal. And that's definitely a good news part of the story. Over on our right-hand side, when we look at our drought codes, the drought code is really representative of that moisture in the deeper organic layer. And this code has a longer period of memory, if we will. So stemming back to last fall, we had a really hot and dry summer. Heading into the winter, we had many pockets around the province that had really elevated drought codes. This map would have shown lots of red and orange, but fortunately with the La Nina winter that we saw ample amounts of precipitation, and a lot of those drought codes have decreased. However, there are a few pockets around the province, namely the Central Caribou, portions of the Kamloops Fire Center down in the southern parts, and then a couple pockets again in that Rocky Mountain Trench that we'll be keeping an eye on. And these drought codes aren't so important early on in the season around June, but really will come more into play as we get into July and into August. And they really represent the potential for some of these fires to get large and become a challenge. So again, those areas to watch as we get into summer. In terms of fire statistics so far this season, again, with the wet and cool pattern, it has been a slow start. We've been lucky. We've seen a total of 137 wildfires so far this season. If we compare that to the 5-year average, that's approximately 60%. If we compare it to our 25-year average, that's less than half the number of wildfires that we usually would have seen by this time of year. And if we look at the total number of hectares burnt, we're sitting at just over 600, and that's only 5% of our 25-year average. So suffice to say, it's been a quiet start to the fire season. All right, so as we head into June here and the true beginning of summer, we typically see our lightning activity increase. And if we look at the fuels that are receptive to lightning, this duff moisture code chart helps tell that story. So we do have pockets around the province, namely the Northwest, in through the Central Interior Plateau, in through the Okanagan, and then of course that Rocky Mountain Trench again, that are showing fuel conditions that would be receptive to lightning. Now again, we spoke about that snow that's still very present at elevation. That'll help stem some of our lightning fire starts at elevation, but down at valley bottom, we'll have to see whether this lightning is accompanied by rain or not. All right, so we're going to start shifting here into the seasonal outlook, something I'm sure you're all curious about. And when we talk about seasonal weather over a prolonged period of time, a major driver of our seasonal forecast is just how our oceans are behaving. And this chart shows us how our water compares to historical averages and shows our departures. So anywhere you see shades of blue, we're seeing cooler than normal ocean temperatures. Down along the equator, we can still see that very healthy signal of a La Nina winter coming to an end. But closer to home, off the coast of British Columbia, we also see a pretty significant pool of cold water. And from the simple fact that our weather typically comes in from the west, all those air masses coming at us, these frontal systems are cooler. That's helping suppress convection or thunderstorms. And again, that cooler water is driving our cooler outlook here in the near term. So speaking of that outlook, here's the latest and greatest from our partners at Environment Climate Change Canada. We've been comparing notes a lot with them in the recent months. And we'll start with the chart on the left-hand side here, which shows the probability of 3 different categories. So in shades of blue across the southern parts of the province, there's a relatively strong signal that we'll expect these cooler than normal conditions to continue in through June for the southern parts of the province. As we get into the central part of the province, the shades of purple show fair chances of near normal conditions. And then finally in the great north, we can see the likelihood of a warmer start to the summer here. As we shift our focus over to the right-hand side and look at the chance of any rainfall, I need to emphasize that long-range precipitation forecasts, as much as we'd love them to perform better, there's just limited skill. It's slightly better than flipping a coin. Nonetheless, there is a signal for this wet pattern to continue. I think there's a really good example of that this weekend. Lots of rain coming at us across the province. So as we get into June, it's looking like it'll resemble a lot what we saw in May, is this persistent cool and wet pattern, particularly for the southern 2/3 of the province, whereas the verdict's still out for the northern parts. All right, so let's step out a little bit more into the future here. And this is where things get a little fuzzy. You know, there are seasonal summertime forecasts that are a lot more conclusive, and unfortunately, it's not one of them necessarily this summer. You'll notice a little bit of a discordance here between the chart from Environment Canada for the month of July. And if we compare with other international agencies here for July, you can see that they're actually hinting at warmer than normal conditions for the month of July. So our thinking right now is that as we enter July, we'll see a return to seasonal values. And then particularly as we get through the latter half of July, we will probably get into warmer than normal conditions. And that signal becomes a little bit more clear if we look at the August charts here. There's a lot better agreement as we head into the latter half of summer that we'll be looking at a warmer than normal end of summer. So as we get into the wildfire outlook, looking at this historical chart of fire occurrence throughout the summer season, week to week, this dashed black line shows the average fire activity over the past several decades. And interesting to point out, as we head into June, historically, we see this dip as we head into early summer. And the reason for this is that we see green up of our grasses, we see our deciduous trees pushing buds and pushing leaves, we have higher moisture content, and we typically do see a slowdown. And with this incoming rain and cool temperatures, we're expecting that slow beginning to continue. But as we round the corner into July and August, that really obviously makes up the vast majority of our fire season. And as we trend towards these warmer than normal temperatures, we could see fire activity grow through the latter half of the summer. Really important to point out, or two key points here, is that more than half of our fire ignitions come from lightning. And the big factor will be whether or not this lightning will be accompanied by rain. Unfortunately, there's no way of forecasting that this far out. And the other thing to watch out for will be the occurrence of anomalous or extreme weather events. And I think the perfect example of that was last year's heat dome. These types of events only become observable at the most about 2 weeks in advance. So right now, early summer, there's no way of seeing those that far out. And our team of fire weather forecasters will be keeping a close eye for the potential of those types of events. So just to wrap things up here, it's been a cool and relatively wet beginning of the summer for most of British Columbia here. There are some pockets of drier conditions, and those are the Southern Cariboo, the Thompson-Okanagan region, and the Rocky Mountain Trench. They have drier than normal conditions and will be receptive to potential lightning starts as we head into summer here. And then keeping in mind those drought codes that I showed you, those same areas will have a potential for larger fires as we get into the latter half of summer. So with that, I would like to hand it back to Minister Conroy. And again, thank you for the opportunity here.
Well, thanks so much, Matt. And once again, thanks to you and everyone at the BC Wildfire Service for all you do to keep the province safe. It's last summer and including the Southeast where Matt is now and saw the incredible work that the Wildfire Service people are doing. So as well in advance of the wildfire season, I just want to let you know that Emergency Management BC is launching upgrades to emergency support services, including e-transfers for eligible evacuees. This will allow EMBC to get money directly into evacuees' bank accounts during emergencies to help meet their basic needs such as food, clothing, and incidental. People will need to register in advance to make sure they're set up for e-transfers during an emergency. And you can stay tuned for more details from EMBC and Minister Farnworth next week, including how to register. I also encourage everyone to visit the firesmartbc.ca to learn what you can do to protect your home, your neighbors, and your communities. It's an excellent website, tells you what to grow on your property so that you can help prevent your own home from becoming a target for wildfire, as well as what you should do in your community. So it's a great resource. And finally, I encourage everyone to download the BC Wildfire Service app. On June 7th, we'll be rolling out a number of updates, and I think one of the most exciting changes for the upcoming fire season is the ability for people to report wildfires through the mobile app. People will be able to take or photos of wildfires and upload them into the app and as part of their fire report. Folks can obviously call our 1-800-663-5555 number or star 5555 from your cell. Other enhancements to the new mobile app include more accurate and timely push notifications, streamlined real-time information, and video tutorials. So again, I just finally want to say that the province is ready for wildfire season and to what it takes to take communities and people safe in this province. I mean, it was we feel pretty happy right now with the report that Matt gave us, but we have to be careful and we have to be ready, and we are, and be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you to our speakers. A reminder for reporters on the phone to please press *1 to enter the queue. That's *1 to ask a question. You will be limited to one question and one follow-up. Please also remember to take your phone off mute. You will not be audible until your name is called. Again, a reminder to please press *1 to ask a question. For media in the room, please indicate if you have a question and we'll bring the microphone over to you. Please make sure to provide your full name and outlet. For our first question today, we're going to go to Dominique Levesque, Radio-Canada. Please go ahead.
Yes, hi, this is a question for Matt MacDonald. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, go ahead with your question, please.
Oh, yes, hi. Could you say in French what we can expect for this start of the fire season?
Sure, I can do that. Donc, Pour summariser le début de l'été, on a eu un printemps très pluvieux et très froid à travers la majorité de la province. Les dernières aperçus à long terme pour le début de la saison estivale démontrent que cette circulation froide et pluvieuse va continuer, du moins pour la moitié sud de la province. Plus on avance avec le temps, on commence à avoir un signal de plus en plus chaud vers le fin juillet et pour le mois d'août. Donc, même si notre début de la saison des feux de forêt a été tranquille, on se prépare pour une deuxième moitié qui sera potentiellement plus active. Et il y a certaines régions à travers la province qui démontrent des conditions plus sèches. Et ces régions-là, c'est vraiment le sud du secteur du Caribou, la région du Thompson-Okanagan et le Rocky Mountain Trench qui est situé dans le sud-est de la province. Donc, c'est vraiment ces régions-là qu'on va porter une attention plus particulière, surtout en fin d'été.
Dominique, did you have a follow-up?
Maybe about extreme weather events. Can you tell us how we can see them coming and what impact it has en français?
Yeah, sure. We spoke briefly about the heat dome of 2021 that, of course, occurred throughout the end of June. So not only was it very extreme, but it was also very early in the summer season to observe that type of intense heat. It's important to put that event into perspective. Historically, these are only the type of events that we see every couple hundreds of years. So very rare, very exceptional. But as our climate continues to change, we can definitely expect a higher frequency. Some studies have shown that we could expect these heat dome-like signatures to present themselves perhaps once in a decade. So while the likelihood of that occurring this summer is very low, it's not impossible. And again, the forecastability of these extreme events is only possible outwards of approximately a week and a half to 2 weeks. So right now, there's nothing like that on the horizon, but we'll obviously be keeping a close eye on that throughout the summer season and notifying not only our internal staff at the Wildfire Service, but all of our stakeholders and the public as well.
For our next question, Tyler Olson, Fraser Valley Current. Please go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thanks for taking my question. Municipalities can still get no more than $150,000 for field management programs through the Community Resiliency Investment Program. That money also has to be split with, what's the government doing to increase that? Or does the government have any plans to increase that cap? And why not after the worst fire season in its history?
Well, it's actually the biggest increase to the Wildfire Service in the history of the province, and we recognize that communities across the province are going to need supports, and so we are committing $150,000. Communities are actually quite excited about it. We've been talking to a lot of communities. The Union of BC Municipalities is taking care of this grant application for us, taking care of the process, and they have said that many communities have reached out already. They're also working in collaboration with the First Nations Emergency Services Society, who is also doing work with the Indigenous nations to ensure they get the funding as well, to ensure that everybody is prepared. At this time, we are hoping that the communities reach out and get that funding and do the work they need to do, because Logan Lake is a perfect example of a community that has been doing Fire Smart for years, and it works. So we are working with communities, and I've had very positive feedback from communities right across the province.
Tyler, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so I was told that participants at a recent Fire Smart conference were told that $150,000 cap might be addressed in 2 years. Is that true? Are there any plans to raise that cap sooner than that?
No, it's my understanding that it's an annual grant that we're going to be putting in place, and we want to work with communities. I mean, we know that the only way that we're going to be able to make this province fire smart is all working together. So we want to encourage communities to apply for the funding, to make sure that they're doing the work necessary. As I said, we've seen the impact of the communities that have engaged in wildfire mitigation, and it's been extraordinarily beneficial.
For our next question, we're going to the room.
Good morning, Regan Hasegawa from CTV News Vancouver. Just wondering, there's still many people that are still trying to recover from the last fire season. It was obviously very devastating. So what would your message be to them, and how confident are you that these new measures being put in place will prevent similar situations from happening?
Well, we can never predict a wildfire season, as you heard from Matt in his presentation. But what I'm saying to people is you need to take some responsibility as individuals to not only hope that your community is doing the work, but also you are doing the work around your own property. I mean, you can do things like trim your trees up to a certain level, and so that the branches aren't easy to catch on fire. You can cut down the trees close to your property that are going to be kindling for the fire. You can plant those deciduous plants that retain water and repel fire. So there's lots of things that people can do. I mean, something as simple as in my own home, I live in rural BC, not too far from the Southeast Fire Center, and I moved all the firewood, which was stacked right up against my home, which seems like that's where everybody stacks their firewood because it's easiest to access, and especially when there's lots of snow outside. But move it away from your home, because that is a fire trap that could make your home go up very quickly. So simple things like that. There's a great little booklet that the Fire Smart BC has put out. You can get copies of it, but you can also go online. There's an incredible wealth of information on their website to show people what they can do. And communities are reaching out to. Communities know that they need to do the work. I've talked to a number of mayors across the province and councillors who are really excited about getting on with this work. And we've already started the work. We've already been doing prescribed burning. For instance, we've been doing prescribed burning in the Southeast Centre over there because of the projection of that it's a little drier there this year. We've done some prescribed burnings in the Invermere area and over in the East Kootenays, because we know that that's something that you got to do. Get rid of that of the fuel that's on the ground.
Back to the first part of my question, I'm just wondering your response to the people that are still waiting to rebuild their lives. What would your message be to them? And also wondering about the $416 million the federal government had promised last month, the plans for that money as well.
Mm-hmm. So we're working with the federal government to develop how we're going to be utilizing that funds. It's between Wildfire Services as well as EMBC. And we are working with those people very closely. The Emergency Management BC is responsible for most of that work, and they have been working with the community of Lytton as well as other communities who have been affected by not only wildfires but floods to ensure that they're getting the supports that they need. And we're also doing preventative work. We've been working with communities like Kamloops, for instance, who's on flood watch right now, and Smithers, to make sure that those communities are getting the supports they need.
Thank you. That's all the questions we have for today. Thank you to everybody for joining us. Oh, hang on. We do have one more question in the room. Please stand by.
Thanks, Peter Brennan with CTV. In the communities of Kelowna and Kamloops in the past 3 weeks or so, there's been 2 people arrested on arson charges. Is there any of this money that's going to be, we heard Matt say 50% of these fires are lightning strike started, leaves the other 50% to be human started. Any of this money going to go to prevent human-caused fires, and especially arson?
I can quote Minister Farnworth, where you can't legislate against stupidity, but we are putting out, like, we're advertising, we are talking to people, or people need to be safe. They need to, arson is. You think, why would someone do that? And so we're, obviously they'll be arrested and charged, but at the same time, we can encourage people to be smart, to be safe. Put out your campfires, put out your cigarettes before you throw them out. People think, you throw your cigarette out the side of your window when you're driving your car. There's dry grass on the side of the road that can go up very quickly. Simple things that people need to think about when they're out and about in their communities and out in the forests, to be careful, take care, make sure that you are not a cause of the fire. So we're doing a lot of work on trying to educate people to make sure that they don't do things that are going to cause fires. Because you're right, there's a number of fires that are caused by human error, neglect, just not willfulness, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's preventative. So we need to do a lot of work to make sure that people get that education, get that message.
In all fairness, that's been going on for years. Fire education, it's still happening, and last year was worse than ever. Anything new we can do to try and prevent those human-caused fires?
Well, I mean, people, they talk about, should we shut the bush down when it gets dry? And then there's, people that have access to the bush actually say, don't shut it down, because we're the ones that go out and we see the fires and we report them. So there's, that, what can we do to mitigate? But there's also the mitigation that we can do to get rid of the fuel in the forests, to do that work, to work with communities, to work with individuals, to make sure that we are doing that work so that we can make sure that to do those prescribed burns so that the fuel is gone so in certain areas. And again, reminding people, don't, be safe. So we will keep doing that, and hopefully it'll have an impact. And especially I think people are recognizing that, because we've had some of the worst fires in the history of the province in the last 5 years, people recognize that everybody is responsible. Everybody has to take a proactive attitude towards it, and so that we can stop it. So hopefully people will get that message, and we will have fewer and fewer fires caused by individuals this year.
And it sounds like we've got one more question on the phone as well. Victor Kaiser, Radio NL, please go ahead.
Hi, yes, thank you for taking this. This first question, I guess, is for the Minister. We've had concerns from the chair of the PNRD, Ken Gillis, saying he doesn't trust management of the BC Wildfire Service. Given the season we had, he says there's been lots of mismanagement and things like that. The concerns, of course, Minister, still existing based on what you and Matt just mentioned on perhaps the season we're expecting. How would you maybe respond to concerns like that from elected officials who say what's being done is maybe not enough or more needs to be done?
I have met with Director Gillis and other members of the regional district and up in Thompson Valley, and have had discussions with them, and we also have had people from BC Wildfire Services meeting with them to show them how prepared we are and working with them. It's a partnership. We fully recognize the BC Wildfire Service folks that are working are pretty incredible and do an amazing job. But it's also a partnership, and so we are working with regional districts right across the province as well as communities to make sure that we are all ready for the wildfire season. And I know that this year we are ready for the wildfire season. We have been preparing for it. We're moving to a year-round service so that we can prepare for it, and not only to do it so that we are ready to react to fires, but also that we can prevent the fires. And that is something that the Wildfire Service has been asking for years. It's never happened before. It's the biggest investment in the BC Wildfire Service. We're going to make sure that the crews have the equipment they need, have the supports they need, so that we can fight those fires in collaboration with our partners. There was a fire just outside of my community last summer, and I saw just firsthand how the partners all worked in collaboration. The City of Castlegar, the Regional District of Central Kootenay, and BC Wildfire Services all worked together to make sure that fire didn't spread, because everybody was right there, and we saw that collaboration. So I know how important that is, and we will continue to do that as we fight fires right across the province.
Victor, did you have a follow-up?
I did, yes. I appreciate that answer, Minister. This question, I guess, will be for Matt. You mentioned the South Caribou and the Thompson Okanagan a few times with some drought and fire concern, perhaps later in the year. I know it's hard to predict things like a heat dome, what have you, but is there anything that can be done to be proactive, knowing that this potential does exist 2 months in the future, just so we're not maybe blindsided by it once again?
Yeah, great question. And I think just being aware of the drier than normal fuel conditions, in those parts of the province, and maintaining that awareness and being sensitive to changes in the weather pattern as we walk through the summer. Some of the patterns to watch out for are obviously these prolonged periods of dry spells, which are typically followed by lightning outbreaks, and we have these ridge breakdowns. So yeah, maintaining that awareness, particularly in those areas of the province, and just staying tuned to conditions as they change, because it doesn't take very long. It takes a matter of sometimes a week for conditions to change quite drastically.
Thank you, everyone. That's all the questions we have for